Années, folles, aka the crazy years. Bernard and Stubbs, let's start there. Really interesting that we come back to where Bernard was from last season. He entered the Sublime in the Valley Beyond and get to see is it a Checker? I can't remember exactly how you say his name, who we've seen previously, who went into the Sublime a couple of seasons ago. It's one of those sci-fi tropes where you can find out what has happened in the past and the multiple timelines which could span a millennia, and that when Bernard comes out of the Sublime, it's only been a few years. So very kind of Inception-y idea of time moving much more slowly in the Sublime and in the world as such. And I wasn't too sure how I felt about that to begin with. I think Bernard, when he came out of that slumber and Stubbs was looking after him, that he knew a lot and there's a lot of paths to take. Now, obviously, he is a host, so he can hold that information within himself. I was on the verge of going, I'm not too sure if I'm liking this. It's become too easy for Bernard to know what was going on in the future. And it did kind of waver a little bit towards the end when we do get to the plains in the sand dunes and the contaminated area, which we saw the bikes come down and the characters who have been looking for something around that area come to fruition. Obviously, do like the mirrored thing with the red lights, but I did think that the beginning, the dream sequence, if we like to call it that, even though it is within the Sublime, that TV shows, books, a lot of areas use this, and it kind of played to me, Westworld is going to be one of those TV shows where Alice in Wonderland is going to be a reference point, going down the rabbit hole, the white rabbit, things like that will always feature in. And you've got I can't remember what the cave's called now, but there's a well-known phrase about the cave, and that's very much similar to what you get in films like The Matrix, where you don't know what's beyond your scope. And this is the type of TV show that Westworld is. Within TV shows and likes of Alice in Wonderland and this, we've had some symbolism and some abstract nature, and that's something I adore. I absolutely love the fact that Bernard was in the Sublime and he was being brought through. He had a white horse, a pale horse, which instantly drew comparisons for me to Twin Peaks or the white unicorn in Blade Runner. Those are things that instantly came to my mind. That was something that was guiding him to where he needed to be. And we saw elements of insight from last season, and then we get the sky sort of scenery, the vista of what we see potentially of the humans versus the host thing that's kind of interplaying throughout the show, and we will talk about that in the Maeve storyline and the Caleb storyline shortly. But I thought it was intriguing that, and then I thought that it was good the way that it was played. I love the Achekta stuff, and I would have liked to have seen more of Bernard going maybe through those choices or through those different landscapes. It will be interesting to see if we do get any of that in the future, whether or not we'll see timelines that might not have happened. The maze is an interesting one. I'm not sure whether or not I like it. I liked it as an element to the first season when it was talking about consciousness. Now it seems to be used more of a symbol, and I'm in two minds. I'm hoping that this will come into some sort of focus when we get towards the back end of the season, and the maze is actually described in a bit more detail. Now, we didn't see Evan Rachel Wood's character this week, and I was wondering to myself, Christina, whether Christina's actually potentially in the Sublime as well. Now, as I said in the previous episodes, I don't tend to think about these things, and from a mystery box storytelling point of view, I just really like to go, ooh, wonder what that could be. But I can imagine a lot of people are starting to wonder about Christina and how that links in, especially given that the maze was within the the mat on the, I think it was the first episode. It was a shame Christina wasn't in this one, but I understand that we are now 3 episodes in, so I think this is an episode season. So the fact that we've got one more episode and we're halfway there, you would expect things to start moving at a fairly rapid pace from now on. So yeah, Bernard and Stubbs. I enjoy that Stubbs actually has maintained his his watchful eye over Bernard. I think he's still under the programming of Bernard, isn't he? So he's the Terminator in this one. He's actually the person who's programmed to look after Bernard. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the diner scene as well. It was nice to have a mixture. I'm a big fan of Lost, and what I like about Lost is its ability to use old technology and have it in a different environment. So having a diner like that with the TV screen in the corner and so going into the diner, it was really good. And those scenes for me with Bernard and Stubbs were okay. The things like the cloth after she's put the coffee in and the tuna, I thought worked significantly well. I was just at that point starting to and ah whether or not that was really something that I wanted to see play out over multiple episodes. I'm hoping that doesn't take place. What's also good with Bernard and Stubbs, as we went through the world in the Sublime, just Bernard himself, is the going back to Westworld. Having that callback works really well, because especially given that we're in the crazy times. I'm not going to try and redo that name because it was difficult enough in the first place. But because they're in the 20s and it's a remodeled Westworld as such, that they try to sort of give you the comparisons without actually being directly reminding people of Westworld and the storyline. The Bernard story kind of comes in before we get to see the Maeve story. And seeing Westworld as it was back in season 1 is a good storytelling way of actually reflecting on what we see with Maeve and Caleb later. So I did appreciate that that's something that they really focused on, to have that in our mindset, have that subliminally in there, in your subconscious, that you can recall that you were already recalling season 1 at that point. So when we do see Maeve in the 1920s recreating the safe scene, then that is obviously something that's fresh in the mind, and I think that was done superbly well. Frankie is a really intriguing one. It's just the very nature of the way that we've got Caleb, who has trained Frankie from a young age, that she idolizes her father, that we have seen in the previous episode, that her mother is a housewife, is wanting her child to grow up in an environment that isn't acting like that she's suffering from PTSD. And what really comes to fruition here is that Frankie is alert to potential danger, and that's been something that's very much the daughter of Caleb, and I like that. I thought that works really well. We've seen her being trained on how to use a gun, which comes into play with potentially the split narrative that they were trying to produce, which I'll talk about in a second. I think the very nature of the bear being taught how to do the kick punch combination, and then the replicant, if I'm going to use a Blade Runner term, not knowing that, was really well done. I had a reaction to that, and I thought that was fantastically done. I thought the whole Frankie actual storyline in this episode actually worked really, really well. I liked the kind of panic room aspect to it. Home invasion is something that people have natural fears about, As someone who likes the X-Files, there was an X-Files called X-File episode called Tombs, and that was all about home invasion. This liver-eating monster was coming to attack, but home invasion is always something that's true to human nature, the protection of the home, the self-preservation, and that has connotations on this episode. And we see the differences with the way that Frankie's mother actually takes out the bad guy, but it's actually Frankie who's the one who realizes it, who finds the body, who is suspicious of the bear with the marks, sees the blood and the darkness of it, the thriller aspect that they kind of instilled in these parts of the episode. And especially going within the bedroom and flipping that over and using some really nice editing cuts to do that. And I think just talking about editing cuts, actually going back to Bernard and Stubbs, is the scenes that were playing out through Bernard's like sort of white horse trail worked quite well with the crossfades that they would have through different worlds. And I thought that worked quite interestingly well. And so it was good. And the very end, as I'll come to now with Maeve's and Caleb's story, that Caleb being stuck in the trap effectively. I'm not quite sure how effective that is. I'm not quite sure why that they would go to such lengths to trap him in that glass box with his copy of his daughter to infect him with the black glue fly thing. But is that a matter of consequence, or does that seem a bit more like it's it's been sort of organized and cultured? Because why couldn't they have just taken him out at some other conjecture? So I'm not quite sure why they did that. But the play in regards to Frankie and the illusions are something that Westworld have done quite well in the past. That there's an indication, and I don't think it succeeds personally on this one. There's an indication on illusion that the person who's actually coming after the kid, that might have already happened in the past, so that we think that Frankie is actually in this glass box. I'm not sure it really lands that way. I didn't feel the stress on that. I felt, yes, the stress on that within the Frankie's kind of break of the invasion itself, and I think that worked quite well. I'm not sure that the two timeline aspect of making us ask the question, is this actually Frankie or not, worked. And that was maybe a slight criticism of mine, but not a massive one. I think it still worked independently of each other. If they were trying to create that link, I'm not quite sure that worked. And then we come to Caleb and to Maeve. Well, this was interesting. Following on from where they were from before, we see that we are in the 1920s. It is a remodeled, it's updated to mobster style. So we have the mobster style hit, like I said in the previously, with regards to Bernard's like sort of time in the sublime, to refresh our memories of that. There's some really rather interesting changes and quirks. I love the Billie Eilish version and of Bad Guy, and we had Enter Sandman, which was a full musical piece, so I enjoyed that. Metallica seemed to be, at the moment anyway, at time of recording, as this episode aired, seems to be around quite a bit, especially given Stranger Things with the Kate Bush and Metallica stuff. So music is Westworld baby, so we've got things. I think the original song was Painted Black, I think, from what I remember. The only reason why I kind of remember that is because I like U2, and they did a cover of it on, I think, actually, Arguments. Let me double check this, but I'm sure it's on The Fly, which is quite ironic. Speaking of flies, the reveal at the end where, and I'm jumping a little bit around, but we will come back to the scene in a minute. The fly at the end seems to be the control and nature, like we saw with William in the first episode, but there's dead fly on the table in the bar. I think it's called the Butterfly Bar, or Butterfly Lounge, or something like that. having that fly on there is definitely an indication that they are using humans to populate this Westworld, and it's basically human on human attacks. So anyone that dies, then potentially, they are gone. There's no longer there. So, and shooting themselves in the head, is hand controlling them using the what I thought at one point was the Queen's anthem. Da, 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 da. It definitely had those tonal changes, which I thought was fascinating. It wasn't that in the end, but I could not help myself think about the fact it sounded like that. But never mind. Yeah, and I love meta. I think using meta in shows is fantastic, and I absolutely love the aspect, and probably the reason why I like season 1 so much of Westworld is those meta aspects within the show. But seeing this play out in a different era with the same programs, with the same non-playing characters, NPCs, obviously a big thing in this show, with what's going on with Christina, but just focusing really on that. I think the way that they are, like, just to have that skin over the top of it, the mobster skin, and then on top of that, even going down a layer and adding another layer to it, is the Westworld Wyatt storyline. And I thought that was brilliant, and the way that Maeve actually is really focused on this season, with Caleb as the main focal driving force of the episodes. Christina has the mystery story box, and now we've got likes of Bernard and Stubbs actually taking us in a different direction. But Maeve has been the central force with Caleb, and her recognizing that there isn't the controlling mechanism in there, and she's herself got shot. I love that duality of Caleb having to protect Maeve in that scene, and then we find that the actual layer is the fact that the Wyatt storyline is part of the actual main storyline, which is part of this storyline. And yeah, I love that. I thought that was fantastic, and long may things like that continue, because meta is something I absolutely adore. And so I think seeing that and then moving into the William aspect, where Maeve gets to fight him and then he appears again. So things have ultimately changed, and that seems to be the two of them are going to be at loggerheads, which will be great to see. And then the trap, as I mentioned before, I'm not quite sure why we would have that trap for Caleb, and is there something more to that? It just seems really strange that they have manipulated Caleb to this point to get here. I'm hoping it's coincidental, but I don't think it is going to be. So yeah, that one's a bit of a stretch for me. And as I say, with the Frankie storyline, that they have tried to split the narrative and potentially say that something before has happened with Frankie, and Frankie's actually here at the moment, which I don't think landed too well, and I won't reiterate that. But overall, that was really good. I don't think on top of that now that there's anything else that I need to mention. Those were the main 3 story elements. I thought this was really driving the episode and the show forward. I really enjoyed this one. This was probably, out of the 3 so far, I would say this is probably my favorite. I probably enjoyed episode 1 a bit more than most, but yeah, I'm enjoying where we're going with Westworld, and I love the allusions to previous seasons. That's it. That's my initial first reactions to Westworld season 4 episode 3. Fantastic. I'll give this an 8 out of 10 for me. I really enjoyed it. I think it's only going to get better. I know some people are a bit tired of the Westworld universe. Certainly not me. I hope everyone else that's watching this has enjoyed it so far as well. Until next week, these violent delights have violent ends.